Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, was a serial cheater who emotionally abandoned his wife for years while pursuing affairs with patients and colleagues. He used his position of power to exploit vulnerable women, maintained emotional distance from his children, and treated intimate relationships like psychological experiments rather than genuine human connections. Yet this same man would eventually develop the most profound understanding of human attachment and emotional healing ever recorded, transforming from an emotionally destructive avoidant into someone capable of genuine love and psychological wholeness. Jung's emotional breakthrough through crisis. Jung's transformation began during what he called his confrontation with the unconscious, a psychological breakdown that shattered every defense mechanism he'd relied on for emotional protection. This crisis forced him to experience the overwhelming emotions and vulnerabilities he'd been avoiding through intellectual superiority and relationship manipulation. During this breakdown, Jung couldn't think his way out of his psychological chaos or use others for emotional regulation. He was forced to sit alone with his authentic feelings, including his terror of abandonment, his desperate need for love, and his shame about his emotional limitations. This forced emotional confrontation became the foundation for his healing, because it proved that avoiding feelings didn't eliminate them, it only made them more powerful and destructive. Jung learned that emotional avoidance was psychological self-sabotage disguised as strength. Active imagination as emotional re-education. Jung developed active imagination as his primary method for learning to feel safely and authentically. Through systematic dialogue with his unconscious, through imagery and fantasy, he taught himself to engage with emotions without being overwhelmed or using others for emotional regulation. This practice allowed him to experience neediness, vulnerability, love, and fear in a controlled environment where he could learn to tolerate and integrate these feelings without projecting them onto others or using relationships for emotional management. Active imagination became Jung's emotional laboratory, where he could practice vulnerability, explore his attachment needs, and develop the capacity for genuine intimacy that his avoidant patterns had prevented him from experiencing in real relationships. How modern avoidants can begin their healing journey. Like Jung, contemporary avoidants must start by recognizing that their emotional independence is actually emotional disability disguised as strength. The healing journey begins with acknowledging that avoiding vulnerability hasn't protected them, it's prevented them from accessing the love and connection they secretly crave. Modern avoidants can begin their healing through practices that mirror Jung's active imagination, journaling about their emotional experiences, meditation that focuses on feeling rather than thinking, and therapy that emphasizes emotional processing over intellectual understanding. The key is developing tolerance for emotional discomfort, rather than immediately retreating into analysis or distraction. Avoidance must learn to sit with feelings like neediness, fear, and longing without immediately trying to solve, escape, or rationalize them away, learning to stay present during emotional intensity. Jung's healing required learning to remain present during emotional overwhelm, rather than retreating into intellectual safety. Modern avoidants must develop this same capacity to feel, without fleeing through conscious practice and gradual exposure to emotional intensity. This involves staying in conversations when they become emotionally charged, instead of creating distance, expressing needs and feelings despite the vulnerability this creates, and remaining present with partners during conflict, rather than withdrawing into defensive silence. Avoidants must practice what Jung called holding the tension, tolerating the discomfort of emotional exposure without immediately moving to restore psychological safety through distance or control. Integrating their shadow neediness. Following Jung's model, avoidants must learn to integrate their rejected neediness and emotional dependency rather than projecting these qualities onto others. This requires acknowledging that their need for love, validation, and emotional support are normal human requirements rather than shameful weaknesses. This integration process involves accepting that wanting connection doesn't make them weak, that needing others for emotional regulation is natural, and that their independence has been performance rather than authentic self-sufficiency. Modern avoidants must learn to express their needs directly, rather than trying to get them met through manipulation, emotional games, or by making others dependent while denying their own dependency needs. Developing emotional reciprocity. Jung's transformation included learning to give emotional support rather than just consuming it. Modern avoidants must develop the capacity to provide emotional care, validation, and support to others, rather than just being recipients of emotional labor. This involves learning to recognize others' emotional needs, developing empathy for how their behavior affects partners, and taking responsibility for their emotional impact rather than just focusing on their intentions. Avoidants must practice emotional generosity, offering comfort, understanding, and support without expecting immediate reciprocity or feeling depleted by giving emotional care to others. Building tolerance for interdependence. Like Jung's later relationship with Emma, modern avoidants must learn that healthy interdependence enhances rather than threatens individual autonomy. They must develop comfort with mutual emotional dependency while maintaining their sense of individual identity. This involves learning to share decision-making power, accepting influence from partners without feeling controlled, and allowing themselves to need others without losing their sense of self-direction and personal agency. Avoidants must practice what Jung called the transcendent function, integrating their need for independence with their need for connection rather than viewing these as mutually exclusive requirements. Creating emotional safety for others. Jung's healing culminated in his ability to provide emotional safety for Emma, rather than just demanding it for himself. Modern avoidants must learn to create the emotional conditions they need to receive: consistency, understanding, patience, and acceptance. This means learning to be emotionally predictable, following through on emotional commitments, and providing the stability and security that allows others to be vulnerable without fear of rejection or abandonment. Avoidants must develop the capacity to be emotional safe harbors for others, rather than just seeking emotional refuge for themselves. The practice of conscious love. Modern avoidants can follow Jung's example by treating love as a conscious practice rather than an automatic feeling. This involves choosing to remain present, vulnerable, and generous even when their instincts urge them to retreat or protect themselves. This practice includes daily choices to express affection, share feelings, ask about partners' emotional experiences, and offer support during difficult times, rather than waiting until they feel naturally motivated to engage emotionally. The path to attachment security. Jung's journey proves that even severely avoidant individuals can develop secure attachment through conscious effort and commitment to emotional growth. The path requires courage to feel what they've avoided, compassion for their wounded aspects, and dedication to learning emotional skills they never developed in childhood. Modern avoidants can heal by following Jung's model, acknowledging their emotional limitations, developing tolerance for vulnerability, integrating their rejected neediness, and learning to love consciously rather than defensively. The transformation from avoidant to secure attachment is possible through commitment to emotional growth over psychological safety.